Where you start is never where you wind up, right? You make a plan and it has to be malleable and it has to, ebb and flow with what changes in your life. And, a lot of us have other stuff going on and we have families and we have things outside of our blog that will eventually shape our blog because our blog is only an extension of us.
That was Heather Christo, and this is episode number 144 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. Thanks for joining me today. I am your host and this is the Chopped Podcast. You know this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Every week my goal is to share with you thoughts, stories, interviews, everything related to food blogging so we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Before we get into today's show, I just want to talk with you a moment about something new we've got going on here at the Chopped Podcast. We started a Patreon account for the podcast, and now for the cost of, let's say a cup of hot tea or coffee, you can help support this podcast. We work hard every week to deliver you outstanding content so you can turn your food blog into the amazing business I know it can be. My goal is to bring to you the content that will help you achieve that. For example, interviews with other food bloggers. Like imagining that you're sitting at a coffee shop with me and this other food blogger, kind of like today's discussion with Heather Christo, where, we're just sitting there chatting and talking about food blogging and learning from her about the things that have worked for her and not worked for her. From that, you get tidbits that you can take and learn and use on your own site. So there's plenty of situations like that on this podcast where we just interview other food bloggers and talk with them about the things that they're going through, some of the struggles, some of the exciting things that they're dealing with, all of the above. But then also, we really work hard to intersperse some industry experts in there as well, people who are very familiar with food blogging, so that you can take that data and really, transform your site. Also, we're featuring experts in general on topics that will be of relevance to food blogging. So that's our goal. We spend hours every week putting this together. And so I hope that this knowledge and this information is something that just, really spurs you and inspires you to take your food blog to the next level. I'm going to place a link in the show notes page so you can go directly to patreon.com/chopped podcast to help support the show. There are several different levels of sponsorship to choose from. Thanks in advance to everyone who supports the show. It's greatly appreciated. Now, on to today's show. Today, we're sharing a blogger discussion with Heather Christo. She's of the site by the same name. Imagine Heather and I are sitting at a table in a coffee shop and you're there with us, because that's what today's discussion is kind of about. It's a chance to get to know Heather better, learn what inspires her about her blog and the way she runs her business. We also talk about lots of personal things that happened for her. For example, the fact that she discovered some very serious food allergies in her daughters and actually for herself as well, and the things that she had to deal with as a result. I mean, can you imagine if that happened to you? You built this very successful food blog based on just general eating habits, and then you discover that you've got these food allergies. Do you continue because you're out of fear of losing your audience if you move forward with recipes that are gluten-free and things like that, or do you stay authentic and move forward with recipes that will feed your family, and also you'll reach a different audience that way? I love the discussion that she shared about that. You can tell she put a lot of thought into that, and so I think if you're going through anything like that, or if you're even if you're not changing your diet, but you've just got some things going on and you're trying to move things in a different direction, I think you'll really take some, comfort, solace, and wisdom from the things that Heather has to share about that. In addition, I love her vision board process. I love processes anyway, but I also love this ritual that Heather has about vision boards. And I have a vision board. Actually, I made it like 10 years ago. I can't even believe that I still have it sitting out there, but I did such a good job with it and I really like it. Addie and I did it together. And so there's that sentimental feeling with that. And I just like the things that I have on that board. I still resonate with those things. But that said, listening to Heather talk about how she does this every year has certainly inspired me to think about doing it again. Heather also talks about how she does a similar process with her husband, and they go out on their anniversary every year and they talk about the things that they, want to do in the next year. It's funny because I had a friend who talked about this too. She said that every year, this was, I think, advice on a therapist, from a therapist to do this, but every year they'd go out on their anniversary and they would recommit for the next year. Like, just kind of a renewal of the bonds and the relationship. And I thought, wow, that's really powerful. And it's a great way to stay connected because, it's so easy to get so busy and, especially with the food blog, there's something going on all the time. Making sure that you stay connected with the relationships in your life, I think is so important. Also, in the vision board process, I think it's important to recognize that food blogging is hard work. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves why we're doing it. And, I said to Kara a couple of weeks on one of the Fry Chats episode that we have to send these messages to our subconscious sometimes. And I think a vision board is a great way to do that. I mean, sometimes I have little notes that are on my desk to kind of help remind me to stay positive. As I talked with Catherine of Weelicious last week, that strength of positivity can really pull you through some times when you're struggling or maybe in a little bit of a funk. I love the idea of having these messages around that help really bring you out of that. I think it can sometimes be our subconscious kind of attacking us a little bit. Is that the right way of saying it? I think so. So, you have this goal and this vision. And as I've said before, as much as you may consciously say those things, if your subconscious believes that this is hard, then you're going to be struggling to make that happen. So I always like to use weight loss as an example. So if you say you want to lose 10 pounds, but subconsciously you believe losing weight is hard, you're going to really struggle with losing those 10 pounds or at least keeping it off. And so I think that's the same thing that can be true with food blogging. If we're constantly reminding ourselves of how hard it is and how difficult it is, and without also, having some positivity around, I think that can, it can really start to wear us down a little bit. So I really love this idea of the vision board and updating that on a regular basis and, just letting it be a source of inspiration that you have. Heather talks about keeping hers in her closet. I love that. That way you're assured to see it every day. She also said she did that because, she didn't think that it was beautiful enough to put it out. So I think that's a great process, whatever works for you. If you want to have it sitting out on your desk, that's where I have mine. It sits out on my desk so I can see it every day, or in your closet, just something that you're looking at every day. It's kind of a form of accountability, kind of a form of inspiration, all of the above. I really, really enjoyed this conversation with Heather today. It was a fun chance to get to talk with her, and now I'm really excited to be sharing it with you. So let's get straight to it. Here's today's feature interview with Heather Christo. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Heather Christo. She's of the site by the same name, and she's also author of the book Pure Delicious, and she's on the show today. Hey Heather, welcome to the Chop Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to be talking to you. First of all, we've been kind of running around in the same circles for a long time, but it's the first time I've had the chance to talk with you, so I'm excited.
I am too. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I love the topic we're going to be talking about today, changing directions on your site and the things that go along with that. But I thought it might first be fun for everybody to hear a little bit more about you. So what was it that caused you to start your site in the first place?
Well, I really started my love affair with food when I was a young child. My mother actually was an incredible cook and was really into like sustainable organic vegetable gardening. And she went to cooking school when I was a child and came back and really opened my eyes to what food could be. And she was a prolific entertainer. So I got super into that. And then I went away to college and I was an art student. And somewhere around my junior year, I decided that probably I was never going to make a living selling my works of art. Probably nobody wanted my paintings, and that I better figure out what I was going to do for a living. And I always knew I was somebody who would have to find a job that was like a passion. And the only thing that I loved outside of creating art, really, because it's just another medium, I guess, was food. And so I started working in restaurants in college. And then when I graduated, I went down to San Francisco and I went to the California Culinary Academy. So I spent a couple years there. And then I actually worked in French restaurants down there. And at one of them, I was the pastry chef and eventually made my way back up to Seattle where I was doing private chefing. And then my husband came along and destroyed my independent business when he swept me off my feet. And I got married really quickly and I was pregnant really quickly. And I found myself in a position where I still really wanted to be creative and to share what I love to do. But I also wanted to be at home raising my really young child, and another daughter followed soon after that. So my husband's a bit of a tech geek, and this was, this was almost 11 years ago. And he said, "Why don't you start a blog?" And I was like, "What is a blog?" So that's really how it began. So that was, probably we started talking about it about 11 years ago, and 10 and a half years ago is when the blog launched.
Wow, there's so much in that statement. I have to break this down.
Sorry.
No, first of all, I just have to make this comment. How cool is it that your mom was just, like a trailblazer of following your passion for you? She
really was. I can't tell you, things were very structured when I was growing up. So with 4 kids, and I had a cousin that lived with us a lot of the time. So my mom really had a lot to handle. But one of her big things was that every single day we were going to set the table and we were going to sit down as a family for a meal. It was, there was no negotiating that. And she made those meals herself. And a lot of it came from our garden during any of the months of the year when that was available. And she was a great home cook on her own. But then when she went to Paris and spent a month at La Varenne, things truly got kicked up a notch. All of a sudden we were not eating casseroles anymore. It was dishes with goat cheese in them and which was seriously sophisticated for the 1980s.
Yes.
And she was making homemade pasta and we were doing baguettes, and there was definitely, a heavy underlying theme of French food and classic techniques. And it just turned, when you're one of 4 kids, you really have to find ways to define yourself to stand out from the crowd. And that was what I did. I was her sous chef and her assistant in the garden. And that's really how I learned. And then I was that nerdy kid in high school. There would be a dance or something. And I would talk everybody into coming over to my parents' house, instead of going out to dinner. Instead of going out to dinner so that we could have a dinner party. And
I love it. And your mom probably loved it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would make Martha Stewart's chocolate mousse tart, with the big shavings on top.
Yes.
And it was the early 90s. So it was great.
I think it's so inspiring from so many levels, just because, for you, it was such an inspiration, but also I think a lot of women have a tendency to put aside their own passions for their children, but what a great example we are to our kids when we just follow that.
I think so. And I think my mom really set an incredible precedent for, following your heart, even though it wasn't her profession. It was just authentically who she was. It's still right now is what makes her tick. She still loves having people for dinner, and she's toned it down a bit in her 70s, but she's that's her thing. And she really helped me. I'm a very creative person naturally, and she helped me to channel that into something that was productive and exciting and really that I loved. So I'm deeply appreciative of that.
The other thing that you said that really caught my attention is that food is just another medium of art. And I have never thought of it that way. And how cool.
Well, I really, so when I was in school, as I mentioned, my painting skills are probably not the highlight of my artistic resume. But I really found that I loved 3-dimensional artwork when I was at University of Washington. And that was really where I excelled. And funny enough, I had to drop photography twice because I was just so terrible at it. And so all these years later, I'm going, it was just the wrong medium. Yeah, I just needed some food to to work with. And so the colors, the textures, the old saying, like you eat with your eyes first. And I just really take that to heart. And now I've found that in blogging, and my favorite part of the process, honestly, is probably like the food styling and the photography. Yeah. And you're just creating a small work of art. And I mean, if anybody goes and checks out my food photography, you'll see sometimes I get a little carried away, but I love it. It's my favorite thing. So, yeah, that's how I look at it now.
You think your art degree helped you with the styling part of food photography?
I don't know if it was so much the education, but maybe it was an arena where for 4 years I was allowed to really indulge myself.
Yes.
Right? I mean, who has that opportunity? I would, die to go back to college now when I'm an adult and paying attention and really get back into that. But I mean, who has 4 years to be an artist? Not many people. And it's, so I'm also grateful for that time. I'm sure it did help, but it definitely opened my mind and expanded, options for what I could do. And then I would say, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what I'm hearing you say there is that for the rest of us that didn't go to art school, giving us ourselves permission to kind of play around and be creative with the photography process would be really helpful. Absolutely. Or with any type of art. I've noticed so many other bloggers that are really taking a lot of time lately, it seems like, to do painting projects and creative pursuits. And it's just so important. When you're creative, you have to feed your soul. So whatever speaks to you. But I do think that there's definitely a relationship between other mediums and then what we're doing here. It's all creative. I absolutely believe that. In fact, I've had this theory for a long time that energy creates energy. So in other words, like to have energy physically, you have to be the kind of person who moves around. The more you sit, but I heard somebody say the other day, creativity creates more creativity. So there is no question. Yes. I just had this conversation 2 days ago. Really? Yes. And it's like when you back off for me, when I back off from recipe development, I'm not as inspired. But if I'm doing it all the time, there are 1,000 things I want to make and all the new ways I can do it. And otherwise, I sort of start to hit a brick wall a little bit on the creative side. So it's just traveling, doing art, eating food that other people make. All of that stuff is what helps keep me inspired and creative. Yeah. I love it. Okay. So one thing I really find very interesting about you is that you started your site, and I think you said, were you saying like 10 years ago? Yeah. Mm-hmm. What was the theme of your site when you first started it? Was it just all food in general, or did you have a specific area that you were going? It was food, and it was entertaining. So I had the entertaining piece because of the way I grew up, and because I'd been private chefing and doing private catering jobs for a couple of years. So that was really, I felt like it was an area where I excelled and could help people. And then food, and not the kind of food I'm making now for the most part. It was like, I would say that I took my very traditional classical French background in food and sort of turned it into like a version of comfort food, like approachable, right? Yes. Every day. Yeah. So there was a lot of baking. There was a lot of delicious, like indulgent foods. And I always say that my best friends were white flour, white sugar, and butter for many, many years. Yeah. And then parties. So that was where the blog started. And it stayed that way for quite a while. Yes. And you had success with it at that level. I did. Right? Yes. I did. I loved it. And I wrote my first book, Generous Table, which was all of that kind of food with an entertaining spin on it, like how to throw parties and put together menus. And yes, that's where I was. And then can you talk about what happened when things changed? Sure. It was, I know I've said this to you before, but it was defining. When I had my first daughter, Pia, Olympia, but we call her Pia for short. Mm. She was, sick from the minute I had her. Mm. She had trouble
like gaining weight. She was colicky. It turned into eczema and then immediately spiraled into so many health problems that by the time she was 5, she was suffering from migraine headaches. And like, I don't know if you've ever had one, but to see a 5-year-old going through that is rough. Not like every digestive problem under the sun, chronic eczema, rosacea. She had a chronic sinus infection that was not to be believed. And she was on antibiotics typically like 6 to 8 times a year and was just kind of a mess. And, you know, like it's your first child. And by then I also had a 3-year-old daughter, Colette, who we call Coco. So Pia and Coco. And she was starting to get sick too. And she'd had a lot of similar problems. They were much more mild, but I was like, what? Like, of course I get the sick kids. Like, what is wrong here? And so as things had gotten progressively worse with Pia, I really started exploring options because she had specialists and this is not to disparage, you know, the medical community at all, but there were just no answers coming up. She was being treated symptomatically by all of these doctors. And I just didn't understand. I was like, wait a minute, how can there be so many problems? And there's not like, there's some overlying umbrella issue that isn't being addressed, right? That was what my gut told me and common sense told me. And the final straw was kind of when we'd spent another really fun day in the emergency room with like terrible stomach pain. And they were just like, there's no answers. And I started going, listen, like what causes stomach pain?
Yes.
This is in my head and sort of out loud. Like something you eat, right? That would be the first thing I would think of. And I thought, oh, well, maybe it's dairy, right? Lactose intolerance is really prevalent.
Yes.
I don't really, like, if I was really honest with myself, I've had a problem since I was a kid with dairy. And I kind of started to go down that road. And it helped a little bit, but not that much. Then I noticed through food journaling for her that if I took out, and trust me, this was my worst nightmare. If gluten and dairy were together, like present at the same time, it was an exponentially worse reaction. Wow. So then I started going down that path. Eventually, after her pediatrician had given a preliminary diagnosis of Tourette's for a throat tick she had developed, which was a chronic, but it was all the time. And I'm like sitting there ripping my hair out going, that's not Tourette's. Like the girl is choking on something. Like what is happening?
You can hear it, right? When she's coughing.
Yeah, it's just constant throat clearing because she had postnasal drip. And eventually I realized it was because something she was eating was irritating her sinuses so much, and this chronic sinus infection dripping down her throat, and then she would clear it. But they wanted to treat her for Tourette's.
Oh my God.
I know this is so dramatic. Yes. It led me to seeking alternative help. And I'm really lucky here in Seattle. People are super open-minded. Naturopathics are considered to be MDs in the state of Washington. We went to a wonderful naturopath who wound up doing food allergy testing for her. And I actually decided to do it too. After I saw the list of symptoms just for your typical dairy allergy, I was like, oh my gosh, I should probably do this. And finding out that most food allergies were hereditary. And sensitivities. Sorry, I use allergies as an overall word, but it's allergies and sensitivities. And then I had my 3-year-old daughter tested as well, because, you know, if we're going down this path, we might as well go for it. Yes. My Greek husband was not really interested. So we started with the 3 of us. And we did that right before Christmas. And that was 4.5 years ago. And we got the results after Christmas, and I was actually in Mexico on vacation with my husband on a beach when I opened up my email, and the results were shocking. So after I had like 7 margaritas to cope, I kind of went like, okay, listen, I'm going to go back to Seattle, and we're going to like confront this head on. You kind of get in your mama bear zone.
Yes.
And we're going to totally change the way we eat, because between the three of us, there were about 30 allergies and sensitivities. And
so you had some of the same sensitivities as
oh
well.
yeah.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
yeah. And you know what? Honestly, it explained a lot, because as Americans, and especially as women, we tend to shove a lot of our issues like under the carpet, especially with health, right? Like, oh, of course I've had migraines my whole life. It was just hormones. Like, of course I have adult acne. I don't know why, but I should change my face products, you know? Of course I've had eczema since I was a kid, but I'm just like, you know, I have an Irish Scottish background, or of course I have stomach problems. I'm just sensitive, whatever it is, right? Like, and we all do that. So within 6 weeks of me pulling all of this stuff from our diet, it was like a different household, like completely different.
Wow.
Every single one of Pia's symptoms was gone. Coco's symptoms cleared up within 2 or 3 days, mind you, but she takes more after the Greek side, which is like they heal up fast. But at the end of 6 weeks, Pia was completely healthy. She'd been slated to do pre-op for a sinus operation, and the doctor literally could not find a trace of inflammation in her sinuses.
Wow.
And just said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Like I had just had transformative health. So I haven't had a migraine since we did that. And it was something I'd suffered with monthly since I was 13. My husband, who was just along for the ride and was eating what I was cooking by default, lost about 20 pounds in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And he wasn't a big guy to begin with. It just was like the craziest thing. So the heart of that program was cutting out gluten, dairy, and eggs. There's other stuff like soy. I'm allergic to weird tropical fruits. It kind of like runs the gamut. I don't do corn anymore, to my great sadness.
Yes.
But it was so transformative that it was worth it. And so then it was like, how do we transition this from like an elimination diet / trial period to a lifestyle that was sustainable? And that's what I spent the next year doing. And it was really hard. I'm not going to lie. And on top of that, I was like, what do I do about my career?
Right.
I spent 7 years building this incredible, what I thought was incredible blog and brand. And I'd written a book, and I'd been doing a lot of TV at that time. And I thought, oh my gosh, like nobody's going to want to switch from what I'm doing now and read about gluten-free. You know, that was still, even think 3.5 years ago, gluten-free was kind of like roll your eyes and gag a little bit. So, it was a huge leap of faith. It was about 5 or 6 months into me having been on this program when I had to go on a series of work trips, including like I went and filmed Cutthroat Kitchen for the Food Network. To do all this stuff where I went out and I was fake. I had to eat the food and pretend that it was okay. And then I would go back to my hotel room at night, and I just so sick. And by the time I got home after like 8 days of being on the road, I mean, I dragged myself in, and I was ill, like seriously, seriously ill.
Wow.
And I thought, I can't do this. I can't do it. So I made the really hard decision. And trust me, there was a lot of fear around this, that I was going to out myself, you know? And I did. And the reaction was really different than what I thought. People were incredibly supportive. Really, a lot of my audience, I maintained, like I kept them around. And I also found that I attracted other people to my site, where before maybe people were coming because they like got a dessert porn hit on Pinterest, right? They came through. The audience that I have now comes because they really want and need the content. Like it's critical to their life. It's not cake. It's not, does that make sense?
Yes.
And it has changed the way that I feel about what I do. So before, it felt fun and exciting and like this, I don't mean this word to sound harsh, but I guess in some ways looking back, it was frivolous, right? Like, oh, I'll do like a fun dessert today or whatever it is. And now I'm like, let me show you how to make this dessert that your child who's never had cake in their entire life can have.
You have
right.
purpose.
Or like, yeah, there's purpose in what I do. So it makes it special and it makes it meaningful, and it feels, however important cake can feel, it feels important to me right now. So that has been the change. Sorry, I talk so much.
No, I love that. And
you can't make me be quiet.
I imagine it leads to a more engaged audience is what I think I'm hearing you say, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. So people are really invested in what I'm doing, and it feels good when you're in a position, whether you're just trying to eat clean or you have sensitivities to yourself, or your child has life-threatening food allergies that you're trying to work around for your whole family. I think it feels good to have a community. And now that I value their community right back. I value my audience when they can give me tips and, point me in the right direction sometimes. And I love being able to give something of value back to them that is hard to find, because it really is in this community.
And I imagine that you feel like a superhero to them because you've been through this. You know what it feels like to have your child sick, and you figure out what it is, and you create these recipes that help her be her best too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, writing the book was excruciating. Any of you guys who have written a cookbook know how hard it is to begin with, but I really felt that I was starting at a massive disadvantage. Like I had to learn how to bake all over again, and do a lot of things all over again. And I remember really and truly believing in that process. Like if this helps one family, to have a health transformation like we did, then it will be worth it. Yeah. So every time I hear that I've helped, it really does mean something to me. And then I love to have the blog there, like as a free resource.
Did you ever contemplate like maybe running the blog one way and you live differently? I mean, it seems like so antithetical, but I was just curious if that ever crossed your mind.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. For sure. And that's the paralysis that fear can create. So in fact, I didn't just think about it. I did it for, 5 or 6 months. And I was like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'll taste the food and spit it out. Like, no, not good. And I really made peace with it. I know I went out to dinner with my book agent and my husband when I was back in New York, and I had 3 glasses of wine, and then I was like, I have something to tell you, And I remember her reaction was like, thank God, let's just get down to business. Authenticity is everything. And all the bloggers know this. When you are really and truly yourself, people know. And if you're not being true to who you are, if you're not being authentic to what your truth is, they know that too. Isn't
that wild about humans? I kind of feel like it's a strange thing. You can be interacting with somebody and you kind of know what's going, they may be skirting around some topic and we all know it. So why not just be transparent?
Yeah, it's instincts.
Yes.
And you know what else I found to be so interesting when I went through that process? How many bloggers reached out and said, congratulations. And there's a part of me that's envious because I would like to make changes in my blog. And I just felt so bad. Also, and I know most of us feel this way that have blogged, you get trapped in this cycle sometimes of creating content that you think people want to see or that you think performs well. But guess what? Some of us don't like, having to, then you eat the food and you're like, gosh, I don't want to be eating Oreo pudding and big chocolate cakes every day. And really, I want to eat fresh salads, but you think your audience doesn't want that. And I think a lot of us would be surprised by what our audience really wants. So, it's wonderful to take a leap of faith sometimes and just do what you think is right for you, because that's why they're all there in the first place. I think, those of us who've built lasting audiences.
I I'm almost laughing here because you and I both have sites that have our name in it. So of
Mhm.
anybody who would need to be transparent, if you have your name on your site, maybe that's a good reason to put your name in your site because it should be about the things that you're doing in your life.
I never thought about it like that. So you're right.
How
That is a very good point.
how ironic it would it be that, we would have these sites and then only be doing Oreo puddings because we think that's what other people want.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
And not that there's anything wrong with Oreo
No,
puddings. I'm like, but just sometimes Oreo puddings, and sometimes you can do what is natural for you on a regular day.
yes.
So, yeah. So
Yes.
that has been my experience, and I'm really happy that that I took the leap of faith and that it's gone the way it has. And I will say, it wasn't without change, and my blog definitely went through an adjustment period. And I lost some followers, but I gained others. And, it took about 2 years before I was at the exact same spot that I was before.
Okay.
But the audience had a completely different dynamic. And my engagement had tripled.
Wow.
And yeah, so it really, it felt painful at first when I saw some of those numbers drop off.
Yes.
But then you realize like numbers are not everything.
Yes.
There's so much value in having a community that's active and engaged and really connecting with the content. And it shows. And as a bloggers, we all know like that having niche content has value too. It has value to brands if you're looking at it from a business perspective.
Yes.
And it has value to the people who you're talking to on a soul level. So.
I love that. Another thing that kind of, when I hear you talk about this and I think about my own site, and I imagine everybody listening is thinking about their own site as well, I have this tendency to want to think that I can create this plan for my site and that it stays the same forever. I don't know why. I find people who are, if I were in a conversation with somebody who was like that, I would find them very boring. I like people who've done a lot of different things, but I find I have to give myself permission to do that with my site.
Yeah, everybody does. I mean, what's the age old thing? My husband always tells me, like, where you start is never where you wind up, right?
Yes.
You make a plan and it has to be malleable and it has to, ebb and flow with what changes in your life. And, a lot of us have other stuff going on and we have families and we have things outside of our blog that will eventually shape our blog because our blog is only an extension of us. Or I try to make it be. So
yeah, exactly. So I want to ask you a little bit, a question on different nature. I was curious about the first time, you started your blog, and was there a moment when you realized, oh, wow, this actually could be a business for me?
The way that my brain works, while I'm definitely an artist, like at the soul level, I always knew it would be something bigger than a blog.
Yes.
Like from the first time I decided to do it, I always thought, well, what will this lead to? I'm a person who always looks down the road to the future. I'm like super corny. I vision board all that. I would talk at many conferences about goal planning and vision boarding. And at first, here's, another example of the path changing. I thought I wanted to just be like a prolific book author, right? Like that's what I had in my mind. And I did that. And the first time I wrote a book, and then I was like, now what do I want to do? And I thought I wanted to do TV, and I did a bunch of stuff on TV. And then I was like, and now what do I want to do? So like, it just keeps growing. And I launched a food line, a year and a half ago. So there's it was selling in Costco for quite a while. And so now we're taking a break and rejiggering packaging so that we can go into retail. Like I always want to look at what are the next steps. And I love that the blog is kind of the heart and the soul of it. It's like my foundation, and my community is my, I don't know, my touchstone, I guess. Yeah. And then I don't have a lot of fear when it comes to being entrepreneurial. I love that spirit, and what else can we get out and create that adds value to other people, not just to the audience, but I'm always like, how do I connect with more people? not in a numbers kind of way, but
Right.
like I really just feel a calling to connect with as many people in life as I can. So, so that's where I'm going. So from the very first day in March 2007, I was thinking about business.
That's awesome. So you knew from the very beginning this was like I love that. That's great because, there are so many people who say they started as a hobby, and that's great too. However, it is that, you reach that point where you decide to turn it into a business. I think starting it out with that purpose is really nice too.
Yeah, it's always been there, and we'll see where it leads.
Yeah.
I think like our entire community as a whole is so full of potential and possibilities that haven't even been tapped yet.
Yep.
So yeah, that's where my mind is right now.
I'm very curious about this vision boarding. What does it look like to vision board your blog?
Okay. Well, this is not even just my blog. This is my life. But to me, like the blog and the business that I create from the blog is a big part of that. So here are my traditions that every year in January, I have a bulletin board, just a regular old bulletin board that is in my closet because it has to be somewhere that I see it every single day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ugly, so I don't put it out. And I put up every single crazy thing that I want to accomplish for the year. I mean, outlandish stuff. And I started doing this probably like 7 years ago. Yeah. I bet it's when I started. So everything, like when it started, it was like, I wanted to be on the Food Network. I wanted to be and do that wonderful, entertaining column in House Beautiful. I like all of these things that seemed outrageous, right? The Today Show. 7 years ago, I put Costco up on my vision board, and I didn't even know why, but it was up there. All of just anything that appealed to me. I had James Beard that had been up there for years. And then at the end of the year, I would go back and to my shock that first year, like 60 or 70% of the things had happened, maybe not in the context that I thought they would, but they had happened. And then many years later, like 2 years ago, my food line launched in Costco. And I thought, there it is. There it is. It's been up there for forever. And this last year I was nominated for James Beard. And you know what? I had completely forgotten that was even on my board. And I went back there a couple weeks after that had happened, which was a tremendous honor for me, and saw that. And I kind of freaked out. And to this day, every single thing just about that's been on that board has happened. So it's kind of about focusing and like, to me, it's all about intentions and putting your intentions out into the world. And then the other part to the vision boarding, I always tell everybody, my husband and I do this together every year. We go out on our anniversary and we have a notebook and we sit down and write out our goals for the year for personally, as a family, like and a couple, and then for 5 years out. So we started doing that in 2010. And so we were able 2 years ago to see like what our 5-year plan was. And a lot of things had changed dramatically, but some of the big stuff we had accomplished together. And then there were personal goals. So we do that every year, and it helps to keep us every year, like really, to me, there's something to be said, like when you put a pen to paper or you type, whatever it is, when you make your intentions clear, it means something. And it helps link us together as a couple and as a family. Like, where do we want to go? What do we see for ourselves 5 years out? And then it'll be 10 years out. So,
That's so beautiful too, because I think couples can easily, you're together all the time, right? But you can easily grow apart if you're not careful because you're not on the same page on something. So, talking those things out, that's so beautiful.
Well, and anybody who's blogging, you guys all understand that this is not a normal job, right? This is incredibly demanding, not just like of your time, but really of who you are. So it can be kind of a soul suck sometimes unless you're really excited about what you're doing. And it's important, I think, that you have understanding in your relationships about what the job entails. And sometimes I'm sure it is hard for people who are not bloggers to understand. And because it can be so draining and not financially rewarding. it's important, I feel like, that there's good understanding about what the benefits are.
And again, that's all about being transparent, right? It's like, I'm putting this
Yes.
on the table. I'm going to say this to you. This is what I want to do. And here's why. And yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
Well,
So,
what I love about your vision board too is that, okay, so I've been reading this book. It's called You Are a Badass. It's an
I
interesting
love
name.
it.
Yeah, it's by the author's name is Jen Sincero, I think it is. And she talks in that book about the importance of our subconscious minds and how they, we may say like, I want to lose 20 pounds, but inside we're saying, I think losing weight is hard. And as long as that's your internal, losing weight's always going to be hard. And so I feel like your vision board is a kind of a way of sending these subtle messages to your subconscious, like, I'm going to be on the Food Network, because that's what I want. That's what I'm going to do. I think that's so cool.
You know what? And I don't know if that's something in the way that I was raised. My husband is incredibly inspirational to me and a really hard worker. My dad is still working. Like I just, part of that is about not being afraid to work hard, I think. And I tell my kids, you can do absolutely anything. Like, I don't feel that there are boundaries anywhere. The day we were all born in the United States of America was the luckiest day of our lives, right?
Yes.
We can do anything.
Right.
And some of it is going to be really hard. In fact, some of it's going to be painful, but I don't shy away from that. I kind of like it. Like, I like that hard work turns into something. And that's, in my opinion, the way the universe works, right?
Yes.
What you put into life and what you put out there is absolutely what will come back to you. And I truly, my kids are like probably so annoyed. They could spout all of that verbatim because I just hammer it into them every day. But my parents did that to me. And I really don't feel like I have any boundaries. I don't feel like there's anything I can't accomplish if I really want to. So that vision board is less about giving me permission to do it and more about focusing like where I need to put my attention and hard work.
I love it. And I love that you're talking about this hard work, because that's the next question I wanted to ask you. It's a perfect segue. And that is, I have this kind of passion for processes. I'm always curious about the process that you might have in place or different people that have in place. Do you have a favorite process that you put together that helps you? Because you're right. I think food blogging is a ton of work and there's so many things we have to be experts in. And I'm just curious if you have a process in place that you just really love for getting your content out there.
Oh my gosh. So now this is going to be contrary to everything I just spouted. I'm the most disorganized mess of a person. This is where my like sloppy inner artist / Sagittarius comes in. Like, I am like yellow pads with, chicken scratch all over them. And, what I would typically do, I do try to cook in bulk. And I'm sure a lot of us do that. Yeah. Like sit down for a day and do anywhere between like 4 and, if I'm like crazy, 10 recipes in a day. And then kind of stretch that out, right, over a period of time. Yes. But I'm always, let's be real, I'm always that person like 10 minutes before I feel like I need to press publish, like, furiously writing and like transferring HTML codes from Flickr. And like, I am not organized. My content calendar is a zoo that changes daily. That's the truth. I don't want to pretend.
But that works for you, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess so, because I've been doing it for a really long time. But I have girlfriends, that have their content calendars 6 weeks out, yes, like immaculate, yes, in like a spreadsheet. And that's not me. That's unfortunately,
do you
so
publish
sadly
a certain amount of time every week?
I publish right now on average like 4 times a week. For a while I was doing 6. Wow. And with other stuff going on now, I'm down to 4. Sometimes I'll do 3, but I'm doing a lot more video, both live and produced. So yes, that change. I feel like if you get a video, that relieves me of an extra day of blogging.
I think so too.
That's somehow how I've rationalized it. So, but definitely there's new stuff every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and there's a new video every Tuesday. And then I try to do Thirsty Thursdays. So I do a lot of Facebook Live, and like I'll publish on a Thursday for a Friday so I can sneak in that Thirsty Thursday.
Yes, I see what you're saying. And I think what I'm hearing you say, based on this conversation, though, is that one of the processes you have in place is that you blog the things that you actually eat. So that makes it easier, right? You're not like coming up with these wild creations. That to me is a form of food blogging that's hard.
Oh, that's really interesting. I wasn't thinking about it like that, but yes, you're right. I definitely sometimes I'll make desserts that I wouldn't have normally made, on a Monday at 11 a.m. But yeah, for the most part, it's much fresher, healthier food. So it's not so painful. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yep, that's right. And there are things that I feel like I can put in the refrigerator and like people can actually eat. Whereas before I would have, like gross half-eaten pies and like I don't know what else, like lurking on the kitchen counters, like
goat cheese. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, all the goat cheese. So yeah, there is some differences in that, and because especially in the summer with how wonderful the light is late, occasionally I will make something for dinner and shoot it, which never used to be the case, right? Like. Yeah. I'm very particular about having taking the time and doing the recipe development. And now these days, because the fresh and healthy and fast food is something that my audience really wants to see more of, it's real. It's literally what I ate for dinner last night. Yes. So
and there's something that feels really good about that.
For sure. Yes. A lot less food waste. I always feel so guilty. I'm sure all of us suffer from that guilt complex, like all the wasted food, and telling myself it's just my art materials doesn't always help. Yeah. So it is.
I'm lucky that my husband has a metabolism of a horse and he hates food waste. And so he eats everything.
You are lucky. I'm like, I have a husband who thinks leftovers are gross. How disturbing is that? Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, I try to pawn off food where I can, but a lot of the time it's like me and the kids eating it.
Yeah, exactly. Your neighbors love you, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying.
If you were talking to a friend that was saying they wanted to start a food blog, what would be the number one thing you would tell them?
Gosh, I don't know if I would encourage anyone to start a food blog now, but if it would, you'd have to do it because you love it.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it, especially if you were to start one now out of the blue. You have to do it because you love it. And if you are trying to create a business from it, you have to have a unique point of view, right? Like you have to, I would encourage you to have some spin on it that makes it truly and authentically yours and that makes it different from everybody else.
Yes.
And then I will never forget this wonderful sage advice that came from Ree Drummond many, many years ago. It's like a garden, right? You have to water it every day. So that's what all the rest of us who've been doing this for a long time know. You have to put energy into it every single day. So even if you're not publishing, you're on social media and available to answer questions and in your comments every single day. Yes. And that's the truth of it. So, it's best to have a good attitude about it and be prepared for that. And as most of us know, it kind of becomes a way of life. It doesn't seem like work most of the time to do that stuff. It's just sort of programmed into who we are and how we operate now. I don't really think that much about it. Is that true for you too?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I find myself, even if I go for a walk, I'm imagining what I'm going to write for my next post. So it's part of my daily life for sure.
Yeah, it is. Or I'm on a walk and scrolling through Instagram and commenting on all my friends' posts and like seeing what everybody else is up to and trying to get re-inspired. And yeah, I would say there's no more downtime. It's few and far between because anytime I can be online and engaged, I typically am.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about that is I'm never bored. Are you the same way?
Never bored.
Never bored.
Never bored. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so I'm at the end of the interview here, and I love to ask these common questions. Or fun little questions? Are you open?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so what's one food item you can't live without?
Olive oil.
Ah,
That
that's
count?
good. Do
I'm
you
like, I love olive oil.
what's the favorite way that you use your olive oil then?
I mean, I literally use it on everything, I think. Truly, I'll bake with it. I cook with it. My husband's Greek, so he brings home, we import it. Like the big
Yes.
Greek church in Seattle brings it in. Like, oh yeah, we're Greek olive oil all the way.
Greek olive. I was going to ask you if there's a kind that's your favorite.
Yeah, we've got a whole selection up there
Yeah.
that I can't pronounce the names of very well. Isn't that terrible?
There's a lot of different
Yeah.
kinds out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
We accidentally got our hands on a bottle that is, I looked it up on Amazon and it turned out to be this like $100 bottle of olive oil. And it is so good. But then I find myself so afraid to use it because I don't want to waste it, you know?
Just for salads.
Yes.
Just for salads.
Salads
Yeah,
and
I
pesto.
love. Yes, exactly. Anything where you're actually going to taste it and not cook it.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Okay. What's the favorite app on your phone?
Oh, Instagram.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. I'm literally completely obsessed.
And you're on it all the time. What's your favorite tip for navigating Instagram? Because I find it sometimes, like I'm on Twitter and I follow these certain people, so I see their information. And sometimes on Instagram, it feels a little more like if I wanted to see what you're posting today, I just have to go search and find you. And is that what you do as well?
Oh, yeah, I guess that I do. First of all, I suffer from ADD in a really I really do. And so I feel like I can never get enough. And I have to look right now because people get horrified by how many people I follow. I feel like I can never get enough.
Yes.
I am following 1,759 people
That's a lot.
on Instagram. So it's like, it's not just food for me, but I'm like, if you live in New York and you take pictures of the skyscrapers, I want to see what you're doing. Like if you're a farmer in Switzerland, I want to see what you're doing. I get so, I get like a high from going through Instagram, like artists, fashion, everything. So I'm a horrible person to ask. My only form of navigating through Instagram is like, how fast can I move my thumb, right? To like scroll through and get my hits. So yeah, that's how I use it. It's disturbing.
I just learned the other day, I didn't actually know this, that you can get alerts from certain people that you follow so that you know when they just posted something.
Oh, I didn't know that either, but I'm going to have to get in there because there are people that I will seek out to see like what their post is for that day and what gorgeous thing they made or created.
Yes.
So thank you. Good tip.
I'll send you the information on how to do that. It's really cool. Okay. I can't imagine that you have time for this, but I'm going to ask you this question. Do you have any time for TV at all? And if you do, what's your favorite show?
Oh, so I'm a news junkie in the last 7 or 8 months, which is probably not shocking to anybody. And then outside of that, literally the only TV I watch is Game of Thrones. And I'm like a diehard. Like I've read all the books. I'm like super geeky. What Scobby Cooking and I do, like a Game of Thrones recap on Instagram live on Mondays, like the whole 9 yards of geekdom.
I see, like I loved Lord of the Rings. I just have hard times getting into games of. I'm sorry, I had a hard time getting into Game of Thrones because it feels so like violent.
You know what, the first there it is. Okay. I'm not gonna lie, it is violent, and I really shy away from violent stuff. But I think the first couple seasons there was some really painful stuff. I didn't want to start watching it. My husband kind of forced me. Okay. And then I got really into it and I wound up like reading all the books. It's worth it. Okay. I swear, if you can get past that first season, you're going to be hooked.
Okay. I'm going to take your word for it and we're going to the season. Okay. And so you mentioned news shows. Do you have a favorite news show?
I'm like, this is totally going to out me, but I live in Seattle anyway. I'm an MSNBC and I love Rachel Maddow. I think she is freaking the most brilliant journalist ever.
Yes, I totally agree. We were just talking about her at dinner last night. I totally agree.
Oh my God.
She is amazing.
Yeah, I could be president of the Rachel Maddow fan club. I'm like, I'm totally obsessed with how she weaves these incredibly intricate stories, right?
Yes.
And then like drops bombs on you and you're like, oh my God.
Yes.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
6 o'clock at news hour, like nobody bugged me.
Because I'm watching Rachel.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Love it. Okay. How can people find you online?
HeatherChristo.com. I'm Heather Christo everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, and it's CHRISTO.
Wonderful. Heather, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you so much. Me too. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to Heather Christo for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. You all, we have so many exciting things coming up soon. Courses, webinars, interviews. I want you to be the first to hear about them when they're available. So be sure to sign up today for the Chopped Academy newsletter and you'll be on my VIP list and you'll get special discounts too. Go to chopped.academy and scroll down to the bottom of the page and fill out the form. Also, if you're getting value from the show and you feel moved to do so, go to patreon.com/chopped podcast to help support the show. Thanks to everyone for your reviews of the Chopped Podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. That gets the word out to others and helps us tremendously. Please keep spreading the word. You inspire me, and I hope today's show is helpful and inspirational to you as well. Now go forth and be your best you.